Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at day 3 of the Safe and Supportive Learning Environment Summit, COVID-19 and Beyond. I'm Natasha Dyer, Deputy Director at Newark Trust for Education, and I'll be introducing your facilitators for this session, which is focused on arts education and healing-centered practices to build resilience. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We ask that all participants remain muted unless otherwise instructed, and we ask that you remain for 1 minute at the end of the session to complete a brief post-session survey. We also encourage you all to share your thoughts, ideas, and questions via the chat. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce 2 amazing women in the arts that I've had the privilege to work with. Serving as your facilitators for the day are Lauren Meehan, Director of Arts Ed Newark, former youth violinist, educator, and mentor, and co-chair for the Equity Committee of Arts Ed New Jersey, and Chiho Feindler, Senior Director of Programs and Policy for Save the Music Foundation, and Senior Advisory Board member of the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning. Ladies and gentlemen, Lauren and Chiho.
Hi, good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? It's so nice to see so many beautiful faces and to have you all with us. We're very excited to share the work that we've been doing, and we hope that you learn something and are able to take something away from today. So I'd like to start off by saying that the intention of this work and of today's session is not to necessarily make anyone an expert, right? We're all on different journeys around social emotional learning, healing-centered engagement, trauma-informed care. And so today is just a conversation to share the work that we've been doing, the experience of the folks that have been working and engaging with us, so that it might open up a window to a collaboration, a partnership, and a different way of thinking and sort of a mindset shift around the work that you're doing. I already got the introduction from Natasha, and you'll get these slides afterwards so you can read everyone's full bios later. But I'm going to talk as the Director of Arts Ed Newark a little bit about who we are, just to set the table for the conversation we're about to have. So we've been around for 10 years now, which is really exciting. We celebrated our 10th anniversary this year. And our mission has always been for equity in arts education for all Newark youth. What's really unique about the work that we do is that in New Jersey specifically, we have a constitutional amendment that basically says anything that's in the learning standards in New Jersey is a requirement. So New Jersey is a state where arts education is mandated from kindergarten to 12th grade. And so our equity work is about supporting schools to meet that mandate for arts education. Geography matters in access to the arts in New Jersey. And so while arts access has definitely increased over the past 4 years under the leadership of Margaret Eel, we still have students in the district that don't have access to all art forms across all grades. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that's really what our work focuses on. Our values, just as an organization, I think are also important to understand before we embark on this conversation. Equity is first and foremost in the work that we do. We're always looking to ensure that the conversations we're having, the work that we're doing is equitable for everyone. Quality is also at the table. So you'll notice today that when we talk about the arts as a tool for trauma-informed care, we don't leave out rigor. That doesn't have to go away in order for this work to be meaningful. Local community linkages, obviously we're the Arts at Newark, so it has to be with Newark and of Newark. And then setting up a community of practice, and we're going to hear a little bit later on in our conversation about the community of practice that we've built around this work specifically and the value that it has created for those participating. And then I always like to emphasize Arts at Newark is a collective impact initiative. So while you're going to hear from wonderful people today who all have an important role in the work that we do, it is their work and it is the broader work of our collaborating organizations and partners that make all the things we do possible. And so just really quickly, I would like to just show you and acknowledge our partners, collaborators, allies, and accomplices in the work that we do. So there are a lot of different people, organizations, schools, funders who are part of the work that we do and help make it all happen. I'd also just like to acknowledge, because I can officially, as of 10 o'clock this morning, you'll notice that one of our funders is the National Endowment for the Arts, and we discovered that we have another grant for $100,000 that we're going to be able to use to support this work in the coming school year. So we're very excited to acknowledge that and share that with you all today as well too. Just a little bit about how we think about our work. We're very deeply engaged in capacity building. So how can we support teachers, teaching artists, and arts organizations in doing their work better? So that includes things like evaluation, support around fundraising development. We have our engagement committee, which is making sure that we have all the right partners at the table, making sure that we are nurturing that community and its various needs. And then last but certainly not least, the work we're talking about today, which is trauma-informed care and healing-centered engagement. Before we dig deeper into these conversations, I'm going to model some of the work that we do during these trainings and in these communities that we've built around trauma-informed care. And so we call these our community agreements. I'm gonna just go through them really quickly. And if there are amendments you'd like to make or additions you'd like to bring forth, I just invite you to add those in the chat, and we can add those later on as we're continuing the presentation. So one is confidentiality. So we ask that the names and details stay in this room, but that the knowledge leaves it, right? So we want you to be able to learn from this, but we want to protect people's privacy and people's stories. 2, participation. So everyone has the right to participate or pass. Sometimes folks, you just want to listen. Sometimes folks want to contribute. So both are welcome. We ask you to respect yourselves and each other. We ask that you listen to understand, which is active listening, that everyone can share at their own level. We want to acknowledge the oops and ouch moments that are likely to occur. So intent definitely matters with what you say, but impact also matters in how what you say is received. Share the airspace. So we like the acronym, why am I talking? Or why aren't I talking? Conversely, that we can agree to disagree, that we can hold 2 truths at the same time, and that while there's no such thing as necessarily a completely safe zone, we hope that through these community agreements, we can create a brave zone. So if you're good with these community agreements, if you can just let us know in the chat, if there's additions you'd like to make, if you could share those as well, we would love to have them. Great, it looks like folks are happy with that. And so I'd like to clarify some definitions before we dig in. So why trauma? And I think this is a buzzword and we use it a lot, but we don't always mean the same things and we're not always holding the same frames. So I'm going to just take a few brief moments to clarify some definitions as we refer to them within our community so that we're all working from the same place. So why trauma? Trauma is everywhere and it informs how we engage with each other in various settings. Trauma is woven into the fabric of our lives. As you can see, it exists in our schools, sometimes in our homes, and in other institutions and systems, as well as in community. So it's part of many of our truths. And why be trauma informed? Well, trauma informed approaches can help prevent re-traumatization and also help people get on a pathway to healing, which is our hope from this work. And then, another question that I imagine some might have is, why does Arts Ed Newark need to talk about trauma? Well, as educators, we definitely want to create safe environments for our students. And when we say safety, we mean physical, social, psychological, moral. There's all different kinds of safety, and we're talking about that universe of safeties. And also, we recognized as we began to embark on this work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that timeline, that the arts ed community often provides safe spaces and nurturing outlets for our students through its really unique strategies and teaching methods. And so as we look for creative approaches to help respond to our students who are being impacted by trauma and our communities being impacted by trauma, it felt like there was a really good space that we held to be able to think about one of the many, many pieces to creating more trauma-informed and healing-centered communities. We also, you're going to hear, and I've said it already a few times, healing-centered engagement, and this is sometimes a newer phrase for people. People are often very familiar with trauma and trauma-informed care. For us, healing-centered engagement comes from Dr. Sean Ginwright, who is a professor at the University of San Francisco. And he shares an anecdote from one of his students: "I am more than what happened to me. I am not just my trauma." And so his work, Dr. Ginwright, and if you have a chance, you can find some really great TED Talks and YouTube videos of his work. I've had the pleasure of seeing him present, and he's phenomenal. His work's amazing. So I would highly recommend that you dig into this if you're not as familiar. But a healing-centered approach really moves from this idea of what happened to you, which is what trauma informed really pushed. It went from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And that was an important distinction. But Dr. Ginwright goes farther, and he says what's right with you. And he really takes an asset-based lens to supporting students through trauma. And for him, a healing-centered approach is really holistic. So it's looking at culture, it's looking at spirituality, it's looking at civic engagement, it's looking at collective community healing. And so as we talk about healing-centered engagement, those are the lenses with which we are looking at that work, as you hear that phrase throughout the presentation. And very briefly, a timeline. So this work began a while ago. In 2018, we received our first grant to really embark on this. And we started by just creating some working sessions and some learning sessions to determine the areas of focus and impact by looking at, well, what does the collective community need in terms of trauma-informed care work and arts education work. In 2019, we were able to really bring together, through that thinking, some wonderful and experienced teaching artists. Our partners at Greater Newark Healthcare Coalition brought a lot of their trainers to the table. We got some mentoring techniques and other approaches from our friends at My Brother's Keeper Newark. And with the transition of their leader to Equal Justice USA, we've also been able to benefit from that expertise as well. We brought in an art therapist and a licensed clinical social worker, and we did our own collective learning to really deepen our understanding of the different teaching approaches that we could take in this work. And then in 2020, through funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and in partnership with those entities I mentioned earlier, we were able to design these trauma workshops, look at quality in both fields, and really come up with something that was useful and impactful for youth affected by trauma, really by starting with the adults who serve them. And so we launched that first in-person training series in January of 2020. It was 15 hours long over 3 Saturdays at Arts High. They hosted us. And it was phenomenal. We got really amazing feedback. One of our initial participants, well, actually 2 of them are going to be sharing today, Chiho, who is co-hosting with me today, and one of our presenters at the end from our PLC who also uses this work as a teaching artist. And people just really were like, this is great, we want more of it. And so we were excited to embark on our second training in March, but of course, the world changed. And so initially, like many of you, we thought, oh, we'll be on break for 2 weeks, we'll just delay it and we'll come back. But obviously that's not what happened. So we made a pivot and we transitioned from that 15 hours of in-person instruction to 6 hours of training virtually. And then additionally began a partnership with Save the Music, which I'm going to leave to my colleague Chiho in a moment. Just really quickly to understand what those trainings were like and what they sort of accomplished, is we had 3 parts: Trauma 101, digging deeper through the arts, our second session, and then the third session was really about building resilience through the arts. And so some of the things that folks left with was a better understanding of how trauma impacts both students and their communities, understanding the need for self-care and how to maintain tools as service providers, but also tools that they could use with their students, understanding healing-centered engagement, as well as the pillars that are often used in arts education that can support a trauma-informed classroom or learning space, because this work is, again, meant for anybody who's in a youth-led space. You could be running Sunday school, you could be running an after-school program. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a traditional classroom setting. And here are just really briefly some of the learning objectives, just again to give you a sense of what some of these buzzwords might mean, because we know with jargon and lingo, it's really important to create definitions for those who have not participated. So for Trauma 101, it's really about that definition building and that collective language. For digging deeper through the arts, it's a lot about understanding how our brain responds to trauma and our bodies respond to trauma. And we also dig into self-care once we have that understanding. And then through building resilience through the arts, we talk about historical trauma and resilience. We review a lot of the healing-centered and trauma-informed principles. And we also acknowledge the overlaps between social emotional learning, culturally relevant teaching. Here it's CRAE, so culturally relevant arts ed. You'll hear culturally relevant pedagogy, but we mean the same thing. The art standards, as well as trauma-informed care and healing-centered engagement, because we feel like it's important for folks to understand this is a mindset shift. So it's not about checking things off of a checklist. It's really about understanding how all of these different components can really transform the environments we provide for students as learners and as people. And we continue to introduce and expand creative strategies through each of these 3 training series. And you'll get a little bit of a taste of that later as well too. And so next up, I'm gonna pass the mic to my colleague Chiho, who's going to talk about sort of her experience in our initial training series and how that inspired our collaboration.
Hi, nice to meet you all here. I'm Chiho Feindler. As Natasha said earlier, that I am with the Save the Music Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization that donates instruments to public schools. So, you know, obviously music, I should say musical instruments to public schools in this case. And, you know, obviously music and arts is the core in what we do, but why trauma informed. Personally speaking, I'm a recovery music therapist. I was a certified music therapist. God, I'm dating myself, but you know, a couple of decades ago. I don't practice it per se, but definitely that power of music, healing power of music, is something that I really feel myself and my passion of what I do as well, and then just see it overall. So when and also that we have been working with Arts at Newark since I guess 2016, when we were looking to provide the instruments to Newark public schools, and there is no other, you know, partners that we could find on the ground who knows the schools intimately, but also that partners intimately, because our model is that we're not a, you know, knight, it was a cape, you know, superhero from New York City coming and dropping some stuff and leaving. We wanted to be in the community, working with the community members. So the model that Arts at Newark had really spoke to what we wanted to do together. So we've been very fortunate on that. And so when the trauma-informed care idea came in and the opportunity came in to attend in person, just really for me as well, with my personal interest, but also the professional interest. And then I'm the type that I only learn if I'm in it. I don't, I read, but I think it's much better to learn it as go through the journey. And I took this as a journey. So I was very fortunate to be one of the first cohort who got to do in person. Nobody even talked about, or maybe they were talking about COVID. You know, we weren't hand washing that much back then, right? So just went through it, and there's so much that I learned personally. And just, I'm not going to get into the details of what I learned just because I'm a very emotional person and I'm going to start crying. But just really the journey that I had. And then just as a person who, I have a very luxury and a privilege of getting to work with the schools really nationwide, but here in New Jersey, in Newark and Patterson, in those places, that yes, I only visit, I don't live in it, but I get to visit and hear the stories of the students and the teachers and all of that stuff. This trauma-informed concept is exactly, I felt that what was also needed and would be helpful for the teachers to do more effective teaching. I think that the music and arts teachers already are a therapist without them realizing it. But I think what if it would be so much better if they have appropriate tools, right? You don't want to go to the operations room without the doctor's license or the doctor's knowledge or the doctor's instrument. And while this is not to make the teachers a therapist or the healers, per se, but just to have an informed so that they know to prevent or kind of help them do a little more, even more pre-diagnostic, right? It's not a Google University, Google Doctor, but just kind of doing those things. So it really spoke to me. And then when we had an opportunity to really do more with arts at Newark, and the beautiful pivot that they were able to make it to the virtual stage, we basically kind of, accomplice that I am, right? Like we basically decided we really needed to offer this to as many teachers as possible. In this case, not just music, but really the arts ed as a whole. So we were able to provide this to some funding along with some of the other funders that we get to work with to do up to 100 Newark Public Schools arts ed teachers. And I've attended some of the virtual training myself just as an observer. And then, I think it still speaks to it. And I have spoken to some of the teachers who are not even the grantee of our schools. Just I'm meeting with outside of the context and mention about us. And then also like, you may have heard about us because of the Arts at Newark's trauma-informed care. And they immediately can kind of like brightens up and say, oh my gosh, that was the best thing I've ever done in that, that session. So that's been just really, a good affirmation for me to say, I think, Art at Newark is doing a great things. And we were just in the little parts to deliver this to the teachers. With that, I don't know, Lauren, if this is a good point to say that we're now planning to deliver this to even outside of New Jersey or outside of Newark. So we do have some plan in place now that we're bringing this to the North Jersey schools and also Miami, Florida. Just really taking advantage of this virtual space and then also being very sensitive that we are bringing in this, but also we had a lot of conversation in Miami where we have a similar collective impact model work there. And my first question to them in the Miami folks is that I know this really great program that's happening in New Jersey, but we really don't want to be again, the North East Coast people coming in and telling you what to do. How do you feel about it? And they really embraced it. And they even kind of suggested a local facilitator, a local social worker who is in Miami, who has worked with the Miami schools. And now we're able to kind of collaborate together. So to have the local flavor, local really buy-in, and that's also important to us. So that's been really going well. And we'll be experimenting this in June. And then we're really trying to see to make it bigger. I do have a luxury of being able to see some of the national level of programs, and I have not seen anything like this, the trauma-informed care, which really is focusing on the music and the arts and that. So it is my kind of a now personal mission to deliver as much as we could. And there's one thing that was good that happened out of the COVID was this virtual, able to deliver in a virtual way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chiho. I think, there was sort of this, we had no idea when we sort of embarked in January of 2020 that this work would become so clearly needed. It was obviously needed before, but obviously COVID magnified a lot of those needs and challenges. So yeah, I think it's a unique timing, and we're really excited too, as Chiho mentioned. Some of our other partner communities like Patterson and Passaic are now going to have the opportunity to have some of their teachers in the training. We also have a grant out with the state that hopefully will let us expand to other communities throughout New Jersey, recognizing that there's demand. People are asking us for it. It's not as though we're sort of, expecting that what we do is, the best thing ever and everyone's going to want it, but really responding to desires from other communities to be able to share what we're doing with their teachers and with their communities as well too. So that's really exciting. And thank you, Chiho, for helping to facilitate that. She's been an amazing leader.
And then I would definitely kind of mention that, the realizing that this is a Newark Trust event, and, the folks who might be here are from Newark. And then, just to say that there is something really special that's happening here in Newark. Newark Trust is great work here. And of course, Arts at Newark and all of that stuff. And then I just don't stop bragging about it to whoever that listen to nationwide. And sometimes outside of the nation. So, just to say, I'm just so humble and really proud to be in the part of the community here.
Thank you so much, Chiho. And so I just want to really briefly just acknowledge some things before we dig deeper into some of these conversations. So I mentioned those trauma-informed principles for learning spaces, which many of you may be familiar with. This is a document that the CDC has presented with some other partners as sort of like the most important pillars. There's lots of components, but this sort of breaks it down in a much more digestible way. But we talked about this earlier, creating safety, right, for our students and our communities, building trustworthiness, choice and control. So we also say voice and choice, right, for our students in their classrooms as well too, which we know very much ties to SEL. Collaboration, so sharing power with our learners, but also helping them build relationships with each other, very SEL driven. Empowerment, building on learners' strengths, which we further exploit with our desire to become more healing centered, right? That very much lines up with that. And then that piece around culturally relevant teaching, which I mentioned before. So making sure that there's cultural humility and responsiveness in our classrooms or whatever learning spaces we have. And I lay this out because this is sort of a component that we use to guide the conversations we have as our arts educators and our teaching artists present their trauma-informed and healing-centered facilitations as tools and models for the folks that participate in our training. So as we move into the next segment of our presentation, I wanted us to just be familiar with this because this is a lens and a context that the folks in our training would have as they engage in the next section that we're headed to. Does anyone have any questions or anything like that? Please feel free to throw comments or questions into the chat. We love hearing from you, and we'll try our best to respond as we go, but we will also have time for Q&A at the end. So don't think we're ignoring you if we can't while we're moving through the facilitation. We will absolutely answer during that Q&A session. So I put these questions up because these are often the questions that we ask people to think about and reflect on after they see one of our arts facilitations. And so I'm sort of preempting what's coming next, obviously, in these last two slides. But again, I just want to prepare you and give you a little bit of the lens that our participants would have so you can get the most out of this experience. I will post these again toward the end of the arts facilitation so we can start to think about it again as a community. But I just wanted to give you all a heads up. How does this make you feel? What changes do you notice in your body? What arts processes were highlighted? Which trauma-informed principles were presented? How might you incorporate this in what you do? And how might this be, how is this healing centered? And so those are the different kinds of questions that we pose to our participants after they see these facilitations in order to think about how they can actually implement it in their own spaces. And so now, without further ado, I am going to present two phenomenal teaching artists who have worked with Arts at Newark forever. We have Alysia Souder, who is the executive director of the Institute of Music for Children and the board chair for Arts at Newark. So we get the benefit of her wisdom in multitudes, as well as Purple, Sheikia Purple Haze Norris, who is the director of NJPAC's Hip Hop Arts and Culture Education Program, as well as being a longtime teaching artist in Newark. These are two phenomenal women. And yes, I mean that in all the ways. I mean it in Maya Angelou's way. I mean it in my way. I mean it in whatever way you're interpreting it. They're just amazing ladies. And so we're really grateful to have them with us. And they're going to take us through in the next half an hour a really exciting arts facilitation and give us a taste of what these trainings are like.
So much, Lauren, and good morning, everyone. I love doing these workshops because I get these introductions that just uplift me, and I just feel so good right now. So, and I'm super excited because I get to work with a longtime friend and an incredible artist, Purple, and I'm gonna pass the mic to you, Purple.
Yes, thank you, Alicia, Lauren, and everyone for our shared time together today. Like you, Alicia, that introduction, I don't know, I feel like I just got to a great party and I wanted to say yes, yes, y'all, and my most authentic greeting. So we are, I know we have, Lauren just shared community agreements, and I want to presence that and the practice of offering and creating shared space and arts and the art form that I co-create is the shared practice of community agreements. So it centers us in an acknowledgement to share power. And something Alicia and I spoke about in preparation of this is that in sharing power, or even saying that, to look at the words agreement versus rules, right? Because of the reaction potentially to rules, or who makes the rules, who's in a position of authority. And that community agreement itself invites that we're multiple people together, and that there's an agreement, maybe a counter, a decline, but a participatory experience. So I just want to say that. And it does center the I in group, which we'll be presencing today, because I may not have engaged with having power before. And now you give me power or this opportunity to make choice. And that can alter my being present in the moment, right? And so how do we take care of the I to acknowledge the various ways that people experience power or powerlessness?
And you know what, Purple, I hear you, and I'm liking what you're saying, but you know what? I want to know how you know all that. Can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Thank you. Yes, I forgot about the I. Look, thank you for that pass right there. So I am a hip hop MC for life. And what that means is my form of communication, expression, and engagement is given to me by knowledge of self coming from the hip hop culture that I participate in and community that I am a member of. And so I am getting to know me and expressing that through my linguistic play and language called rap. And so it is a form of music, and is the spoken word, but not spoken word poetry, the spoken word of hip hop culture. Shout out to spoken word poetry, because that's like our cousin. It's like a tree, right? And it branched off this way, branched off that way. I am a director of hip hop education programs and a United States ambassador for hip hop education. I am the daughter of Linda and Jerry. I do identify as African-American female. And for those who are here, I am wearing red braids. I am of brown skin, and English is my first language.
Thank you, Purple. Now I get it. Now I get it. And my introduction will be a lot less lyrical than hers, but I will do my best. So I started off my work in theater arts. So I'm an actor, writer and director, and spent much of my early adult years as a teaching artist and continue to do that to this day. And I enthusiastically worked with any and every group that I possibly could, and often ended up working with the very vulnerable and traumatized young people. And a lot of my work then, in addition to just teaching theater and acting and writing, also became about how to use those tools to really empower, uplift young people and begin that healing process using the art to do that healing. And I've worked in just about any kind of, in many different types of communities, from group homes to mental facilities, to youth prisons, all sorts of different spaces where children have gone through tremendous experiences. And the one thing that I know for sure, that I know, is that children are children are children. And that they're always seeking to feel connected, to belong, to be accepted, and to be seen. And so this work is something, so the work that I'm going to do a little activity with you, and I would like to invite you to join us in these activities, because and by doing that, you can do that by turning on your camera so that we know that you're willing to play with us. And you can choose to do that at any point. So if you don't feel comfortable doing it now, as soon as you do feel comfortable, feel free to turn that on and be a part. Thank you, Janice. So good to see you. And I just wanted to shout out to Sonic. Good to see you too. It's been a minute. Hello. So I'm going to start off with an activity that I have that I launched at working at a school with boys. Boys that were on the tier 3 of their school, saying that they were really in that, they were the most challenging kids in the school in terms of their grades, attendance, in terms of getting into trouble, getting suspensions, all sorts of things. So and these were the boys that seldom got any arts activities because they were always kicked out or somewhere else. So in addition to hiring 3 male teaching artists to work with these young men, I also was a part of that team and launched something called the Feelings Wheel. And we're going to do that activity in a moment, but the men that I was working with were real hesitant about incorporating this tool, saying that boys don't really want to talk about their feelings, and it just felt like it wasn't going to be a good way to start our sessions and end our sessions. And what we learned is that they love talking about their feelings, and that was the first thing they wanted to do. And they would say, can I do it? Can I lead this week? Can I lead? Don't forget, we have to do the Feelings Wheel. And so it's, and it really helped to reinforce to me how deeply important it is to give our young people an opportunity to, and all of us, not just young people, by the way, all of us, but certainly young people that we're working with, an opportunity to express themselves and begin to practice that, to begin to practice being able to say how I feel without having to be ashamed or having to explain or having to, and being able to be vulnerable and that being okay. So we're gonna do a little bit together. So Miss Lauren, can you just, can you share that Feelings Wheel just so we can have a look? And so what we would do is they would have an actual handheld wheel that would have 2 arrows on it, right? And the first arrow, it would point to this is how I feel, and then the second arrow is this is how I want to feel. Okay, so you would imagine that, and this is where we begin. This was just a way for them to begin to tune into different emotions. Certainly, we have a whole lot of feelings, and then when we do our activity, you can pick whichever feeling you want. All right, and so we're going to take that back down, Miss Lauren. And so this is how it goes. You're going to say your name. So, hi, my name is, and you say your name. I feel, and give us a feeling. And then you're going to say, and I want to feel, and give us another feeling. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to explain, oh, I didn't get my coffee today, or I had a fight with someone. Nope, you just say those, and then you're going to pass it on. All right. Is there anyone who would like to begin? Anyone? All right, Karen. So remember, my name is blank. I feel blank. I want to feel blank. And then you're going to pass it on afterwards. Okay. You're going to send it to someone.
Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Karen Leva, and I guess I could say I feel anxious and I want to feel, and I always say this, just I want to feel present. And I would like to pass this on to Natasha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha Dyer. Right now in this moment, I feel proud and I want to feel playful. And I will pass it on to Richard Simon.
Hi, my name is Richard. I feel a little bit tired this morning and I want to feel inspired. And I pass it to Miss Purple.
Good morning, and thank you, Richard. I feel excited and I want to feel excited. And I'm going to pass it to Barbara.
Thank you, Miss Purple. I'm excited, and I'm excited and intrigued. I don't know if I'm allowed to use both. And what I want to feel is competent. So looking forward to learning. Oh, I'm going to pass it on to Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I feel content, and I want to feel supercharged. And I'm going to pass it to Sonnet.
Hey, everybody. I'm Sonnet, former New Yorker, reformed New Yorker. And I feel so excited and inspired. So I'm going to use both of those. And I want to feel like I can still contribute. And I will pass it on to, let's see, who else? Rain.
Oh, Rain. Okay, great.
Everybody, I'm Rain, and I feel excited and I want to feel excited. So awesome. I'm going to pass it on to Chiho.
I'm Chiho. I feel passionate and I want to feel passionate. I'm going to pass to Fran.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Fran. I feel overwhelmed and I want to feel at peace. And I pass it on to Janice.
Unmute, Janice.
Sorry. Good morning. My name is Janice and I feel blessed. And I want to continue to feel blessed and inspired.
Excellent. And you know what? I'm going to interrupt right here just because I know we need to pass it on, but I saw Chastity turned on her camera. So I wanted to make sure she got an opportunity to share before we moved on. Good morning.
And I moved on to, I pass it on to Chastity.
Thank you, Janet.
Good morning, everyone. So I feel a little tired. My camera was off. So thanks for the force to get it together. So I want to feel energized is where I'm trying to head. Thank you. And I'm not sure, pass it on to, has Shamira gone? I'll pass it to Shamira.
And then Shamira will be our last one, and you're going to pass it back to me, Shamira, when you're done, okay?
Hi, everyone. I am Shamira, and I want to feel powerful. And guess what? I feel powerful. And I will pass it on to, I don't want to mess up your name, Asaya. a Shay. I'm
It was
sorry.
kind of close. It was there. It's Alicia. It's
Alicia.
All right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for playing with me in this this feelings wheel activity. And just really quickly, so that I can give Purple her chance to do her thing, is that be giving them, how did it feel? Can I ask that question? How did it feel to say how you felt? Just unmute and say something. How did it feel?
Good, felt good.
It felt good?
Different too, because
Great.
we're not used to having someone asking, how are you feeling? So it's like, how am I feeling? It's kind of like putting yourself in the spotlight. But I feel like that's something that we have to practice, talking about ourselves and be comfortable with that, because normally I feel in general we don't. It's like when you're in an interview and someone asks you like, oh, tell me something about yourself. You're like, well, I like olives. Like, where do I start off? Do I tell you? So it's a fun activity. So thank you so much, Alyssa.
Thank you. And how did it feel hearing someone else's feelings? How did it feel hearing the group? Any observation around that? All right, I'll say, and I'm seeing the chat light up, and I'm not able to read it in this moment, but just to say that one of the things as a teaching artist, it gives me an ability to hear how the room is feeling, right? Are we in positive spirits, which I'm hearing a lot of today? Sometimes we're hearing a lot of stress or anxiety, or just someone that's having a rough day. And we can use that in how we teach. And also it allows each other to feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this feeling. Or wow, this person is feeling better than me. That might be someone whose energy I need to connect with. So it's a great tool for information and sharing and connection. Go ahead, Ms. Purple.
Thank you for passing the mic, Alicia. I also love that activity, which lends itself really well into what we're going to do now, because people were heard, visible, called on. We acknowledged ourselves. And in acknowledging ourselves, we actually contributed to the community, which is that hip hop practice. And again, I started with the yes, yes, y'all. And as people shared my observation and seeing those who I could see, people were nodding. And I was like, oh, yes, yes, y'all. It's still happening. It's still happening. Because hip hop is an affirmative community practice, and often with different cultural codes. And so I'm going to share something that's not exclusive to hip hop, but it's also something we do in hip hop. Hip hop uses everything and anything to create, including information for the past. And as we just did, how do we feel right now? Our authentic selves, and transformation, creating who we imagine or will be, and affirming and claiming that. That being also a practice of power and acknowledge of self, and telling the community who we see ourselves as is really important, because the community will also participate in that vision coming true. And so we form often in a cipher, which mimics power sources of our life, i.e. the sun, the moon, the globe. And so in that circle, what we call the cipher, everyone is participating, no spectating. Now, the variety of participation looks similar than what we did today. As people were speaking and sharing, others wrote in the chat, others were listening. That also helps generate the community. And the speaker, or the person in the center of the cipher, is loved on, focused on, made visible, given attention, and gets elevated to do what they plan and go beyond their own thoughts, considerations, and do what they didn't even mean to do. So that advances, that's where innovation happens, big contribution, and improv, which we call freestyle. And so I come in this space now, this activity where we are going to define ourselves. And I'll name Kuji Jakalia, a principle in Kwanzaa that says self-determination. It actually says that we name ourselves, we create ourselves, and that we speak for ourselves. So again, just an example of a culture that came, that contributed to hip hop, a practice and a principle. And so right now, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna name ourselves because we have the names we have. Now, is there anyone here, because there are different cultures where you do get to choose your name as a baby or your birth order. Is there anyone here that named themselves? Did you have say when at that point of birth or that point of transition? And I say this because not everyone is with their birth family. Not everyone has that information. And I learned in doing this activity that simply asking someone, what is your name? Why were you named that name? What does it mean? Could be triggering. There's an assumption I'm making about how families are and where people are and information they have access to. So I altered and created 3 options. What's it like to have your name? And I'm just going to ask you to take a moment, like you did, take inventory of your feelings. What's it like to be called what you're called? And just think about that for a minute. You didn't ask to be called that. You didn't tell them that's what you wanted to be named. You're living with that experience. My name is Sheikia. I didn't have any say in that. Purple is where I chose to define myself. And that's what we're going to do today. So the way that I'm going to invite you to choose your name from hip hop approach is 1, you may choose to go with something you love. I love drawing hearts and clouds as a kid. So I was K-Love. That was it. Pretty right there for me, right? I had a young person that named themselves Shopping Spree. So if you think of this just as play and practice, and again, the creative process here is not about thinking because there's no right or wrong answer in art. It's about allowing and being bold and brave and taking a risk and putting it out there and just see. It's okay. You don't have to stick with it. But if we can use the chat right now, taking something you love and turning that into a name. There may be another shopping spree here. We got an ocean in the house. We got some love in the house. Itole's in the house. KC's in the house. You can spell it with different shapes. You can use symbols. You can use numbers. That's how we invite those who are still learning to spell to do it the way they want to, as if it's a creative design. They communicate the way they hear the word and they spell it that way. That's what we lend themselves to. I love this. As they keep flowing, keep going. Now, the next way you can choose your name is, what do you stand for? If you put that in the chat. Like purple is really a code word. Purple, how do you make it? Red, white, and blue. All I knew is that was 4 generations American. And that's my flag. It also, if you put red, white, and blue together, Democrats, Republicans, Bloods, and Crips, it also means unity. It means togetherness. So when purple comes in the room, peace enters the room because I'm there. So what's present because you show up? Yup. Be bold, be brave. Tell us. We lucky to have you because now we got that. See, we got creativity. We got faith. We got humanity. We got positive energy. We got empathy. We got acceptance. We have royalty and a hue of blue. We got passion. Look how abundant we are. Last but not least, now this part might pull up some pain and hurt. And I'm going to invite you to trust yourself, the process, and the communities listening, because look at all what we have here. Joy and pain, like sunshine and rain. What do these people have in common? And some of you friends have heard this before, and it's fine if you remember and you want to shout it out. But listen to these hip hop names. Big Punisher, Chub Rock, Heavy D, Big Buff, the Fat Boys, Notorious B.I.G. Yeah. Don't always want to say that. It's not politically correct. It causes harm. Shame may bring up blame. But notice these people took what they may have been called. If you can imagine, if you don't know who these people are, it's fine, but the name tells you something, right? Very, very large, big, obese men who may have not had choices about food in their home, who had to, again, live with the choices adults made. And they took what they would have been called in a way to cause harm, and they claimed their power by putting it forth and not hiding, running for it. They could not be hurt by calling them that when they chose it. So I invite you to look at something you've been called in your life, maybe in your early childhood or maybe not, that did not serve you. And you take the power now and you define who you are and alter, recreate, repurpose what you have been called. As we say, flip the script. So all that may have been said about a Black girl, big booty girl from the Bronx, now you got to call me purple. I love being Black, especially now that Black is purple.
We have a couple in the chat. New boy Rich. I like that, Richard. That's good. Our colleague Sanaz Hodra couldn't be here today. She's got another obligation, but she came, I think she'll be okay with me sharing this. She came to America from Iran as a refugee, her and her family, and people called her a terrorist and different things like that. And so she uses the peaceful Persian as her way of flipping sort of how she was called as a child versus now, which I think is a good one. Yeah, Ocean Crier. These are good ones.
Yes. So I'm going to invite us as a community to do a mic check. Now, this is going to break out, and it's not intended necessarily that every person will hear you. But this is about you speaking something about yourself into existence. And so at this moment, I'm going to invite you, as Jay-Z says, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is. Or you could use Eminem. Hi, my name is, and you say who you are. If you don't have the name yet, that's fine. Maybe say that thing. But this time, taking it on to transform it because it's what they said. It ain't who you are. And 1, two, 1, 2, 3, mic's on. Who are you?
Bossy Bones.
Say it loud. Let me hear you. Just shout it out all at the same time.
Bossy babe.
Ocean Crier. Olivia the Ocean Crier.
Tolerance. My name is Tolerance.
Yes. Thank you. And so glad you are here.
So there's some in the chat too. If you get a chance, take a look. Big Phoenix Fly and Diva D.
Alysia, what about you? See, I'm actually the Superfly Skywalker. That's what I had to do with my afro. I had to make it Superfly. What about you? Who are you? Who you be?
See, why you got to put me on the spot? I'm still working it out. I'm still mulling over things, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Tell me what you're working with. We got 30 seconds. I'll help you out.
All right.
Hip hop, we don't leave you alone. We always on your side.
All right. So my first word was creativity. My second word that I bring in is helping people be seen, seeing people for who they are. And my last was big girl. I was always a big kid, and I was constantly being told how big I was.
Y'all have any ideas? Put it in the chat. Alysia, you know you my sister, right?
I know.
Because my first record deals when I changed, well, I was gonna sign it, didn't sign. My hip hop name before Purple was Big Kid, the BIGGKIDD. I passed it on to you if you want that.
Oh.
I would call you the Big Canvas Kid because you said visibility makes sure people are seen or created. So the Big Canvas Kid.
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
Play for life.
Ooh. Big vision, creative. Well, I like that too, Natasha. Keep them coming.
The BBC is in the house. Thank you, Alicia. That's our time.
Unfortunately, it is. I know we could listen to both of you forever. It's always a joy, and I always learn new things each time I hear from both of you. So thank you for your generosity and for sharing your gifts with us today. I know I appreciate it, and I hope others got as much out of it as I know I did. And this is like the 1000th time that I've gotten to see these two facilitate, and I learned something new every single time. So thank you so, so much. And I would like to invite us, I'm gonna bring the slides back up again, to just really briefly think about those questions that I posed earlier, right? These are the questions that we often ask folks post their experience with Alysia and Purple and some of our other facilitators, right? Which so much just happened. It's hard sometimes to kind of like fully break down and like unpack sort of all the gifts that you've just been given. But I think it is helpful to sometimes think about, you know, how did this make you feel? To Alysia's point, right? Claiming your feelings, that's really interesting. That's not a space we're often given. Sometimes in that exercise, the word that comes out of your mouth isn't what you expected in terms of how you were feeling. There's something really powerful about being able to name and claim how you feel and how you want to feel. To the same point with Purple's exercise, right? Getting to own your name and your identity. That's really powerful. And so imagine, how does this make you feel, right? What did you notice in your body as we were going through these experiences? Did you feel anxious at times? Did you feel relaxed? Did you feel included? Did you feel as though you belonged? And how did that manifest in your body or your breath? What artistic processes were highlighted? So in addition to the art forms, within the art standards, we know that there's different processes. So there's presentation, there's creating, right? There's connecting. And so we got to do all of those things as well. In terms of trauma-informed principles and practices, right? We had voice and choice about how we participated in the exercise, right? There was cultural relevance. So both our presenters were conscious of how we might feel about the exercise, the discomfort that might exist, but created an open space where we could explore and share at our own pace, right? We built trustworthiness as a community. So a lot of these things were touched on and more. And then think about, well, what are some ways that you might incorporate something like this into your classroom space, right? Maybe you have a summer program coming up. Could this be an interesting way to start your relationship with your students? Having them name themselves and claim who they are for you in your space. Giving them an opportunity to acquire a stronger sense of how they feel, right? We don't always have words even as adults for how we feel. And so perhaps these exercises could provide that resource to your students and to yourselves, right? Because it's about modeling, it's about back and forth, right? We are equal as learners with our students. And then thinking about how this is healing centered, right? So this doesn't look at what's wrong with you. It totally took what was right with you. What do you like about yourself? How do you want to name yourself, right? It gave you the power. And so these are all interesting things that I think you may want to continue to reflect on as you think about today's experience and you think about how you could bring it back to your organization or your program or your classroom. I just really briefly do want to talk about the impact of this work so far. I've mentioned, anecdotally that we keep hearing really great things. And so I have some examples for you. So we have some participants who are additions to the folks you're hearing from today, who have talked about how important this work has been for them and how impactful this training has been. In addition, 100% of the folks that we surveyed post this workshop felt they gained more tools or strategies to work with students who are impacted by trauma. And 93% they felt they had a better understanding of how trauma impacts the brain, the body, and community. So in addition to being a pretty fun experience, if I might say so myself, there was really impactful, meaningful takeaways for the folks who have participated. And to speak on that a little bit more, I want to talk a bit about our professional learning community. And so in February of this year, seeing a need for folks to continue to gather and really check for understanding, deepen their practice, provide space for reflection, we launched a professional learning community with 5 sessions beginning in February. We just had our 4th session on Monday. And it's really been a great opportunity for folks to think about this work and share and sort of feed off of each other while also deepening their learning and moving sort of a little bit deeper into their understanding of trauma and healing-centered engagement. And so who better to talk about this work than some of our participants? So we're going to be hearing from Lara Gonzalez, who is a teaching artist in the greater Newark area and was one of our very first initial participants in that in-person cohort with Chiho that was mentioned earlier. We will also hear from Kelly Hines, who is a 2nd year theater teacher at Park Elementary School here in Newark. And she's going to be telling us about her experience. And last but certainly not least, we have Olivia Betson, who is a music teacher at Peshine Elementary School. And again, you'll be getting this slide deck. You'll have access to this later. And there's also a link in the chat with bios. So if you want to dig deeper into these bios for all of the folks today, our arts facilitators, Chiho, myself, as well as this panel, you have access to that. And so I invite us again with our community agreements, right, to welcome in this brave space, Lara, Kelly, and Olivia. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop share. Yes, I'm going to stop share. And I am going to begin by posing some questions, but we're gonna let the conversation evolve and kind of go where it's going to go. But I have sort of given some guiding questions to the panelists to give them a sense of some of the things that we hope to share with you today. So I'd like to start by having each of you introduce yourselves in your own way, and then share with us how you came to be a part of this work. And you can just, whoever wants to go first can go first.
Passing to me, Lara. I see the hand. Okay, sure. Well, I'm Kelly Hines, and I guess in the spirit of purple, I will tell you the I. So I'm Kelly Hines. I consider myself a lifelong teacher and a lifelong learner. I identify as a white, superbly proud middle-aged woman, and and I also identify as an artist. I have a large musical theater background as a dancer and a singer. What brought me to this was, logistically speaking, was the great and wonderful Margaret Eel, who registered all of us in our arts department for this program. But then we got this email, I believe it was from Lauren, asking if we wanted to apply to go further. Man, I passed over the email and then I went back to it. Something kept bringing me back to this. And what brought me back to it was my experiences in my first year. So some of those little moments that happened where I wasn't sure how to respond, or I was afraid how to respond, or I didn't feel I had the right, because I was a white woman in a classroom of brown people, to respond to what was happening in my classroom. So I felt toolless. And I said, I'm going to go do this. I need to do this work. I need to find out why I'm afraid. I need to be empowered to be effective in the classroom. So I'll pass.
Hi, I'm Lara. I'm a multidisciplinary teaching and performing artist. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm Chiho. I'm also super emotional about this programming, and so I'm always on the verge of something speaking about this work. So thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm a lifelong dancer, and I came to this work a long time ago, being a seeker of self-exploration, coming out of college, studying art history, being in New York City, wanting to find out about myself, and always knowing that moving for me, dancing, moving, being in motion was not knowing at the time, but super therapeutic, right? Keep moving that energy. So, we don't get stuck in, maybe a painful spot or an uncomfortable spot, which of course we do. But this to say that that's how I came to this work. And I'm so relieved sitting here today talking with so many people who get it, who know that this is so important. So I've really been waiting for this moment. I'm crying a little bit, but I've been waiting for this moment in time where this can become a baseline. I'm crying. I'm going to mute myself.
You don't have to mute yourself. Crying is perfectly acceptable in this space and is always welcome. Feeling the feels is always welcome. Do you want to jump in, Olivia?
Yeah, my name's Olivia Betson. I'm originally born and raised in the cornfields of Kansas, but I found my way out to to New York City through music. I will be honest and say that we all have trauma, and I had my own. And even as a child, oh gosh, here I go now. I was drawn into music as my therapy, not even having any idea what all that meant, but music became my therapy, and it became my life source. It brought me through good times, bad times, all of that. And I chased it. I chased it in college. I chased it to New York City. I chased it to be an artist myself. And I kept finding myself in roles with children. And I was like, oh my gosh, I always loved children, but I was chasing my dreams, and it came right back around full source. And it was like, well, goodness gracious, why didn't I see this before? I was meant to be a teacher with children. I was meant to teach them music, and I was meant to use music as a source of healing for others. And I am a first-year teacher in Newark Public Schools. I've started my journey as a full-time educator during a pandemic. And the things that I have seen through the videos, the things that I hear from my kids, I'm just now starting to get to be with them in person, that I am starting to really realize, I always knew this, but the work that we have to do now after this monumentous year is going, and the arts and the trauma-informed care is going to be so essential for the fall, not just for ourselves as educators and like, oh my gosh, what did everyone have to go through learning how to teach online, but for the emotional trauma that our kids have gone through, being at home, not getting the care that they would have gotten from their teachers and the love from their communities at school. We just have so much ahead of us. And this work is just so important to continue, pandemic or not, but now more crucial than ever. And I just think, I thank everyone here on the panel for your commitment and allowing me to be here today, kind of as a fly on the wall here as I learned too from each of you.
Thank you. Well, wasn't that an introduction, right? Thank you guys so much. And so I think you've touched on this a little bit, each of you, but I'd love to sort of pick a little bit at really like the challenges, but also the rewards of your role in this work so far, right? Because it's a journey that we're all embarking on in different stages, right? We're all at different points in exploring this. But for you, what are the challenges, and also what are the rewards so far in this work?
Share a little bit I was thinking about. One, I guess it's a challenge and a reward. I guess it's both. We were working with the social identity wheel. And just to give a little background for those that might not know, it's a wheel that has several different identities, and there were several questions. Which one do you identify with the most? I don't know if you want to tell a little bit more about it, but gender was on there, race was on there. So it was making me think about myself, what things I may not be aware of within myself. So, for example, I went to a breakout room on one of these identities, which was gender identity, because I feel like I need to learn more. I feel like I'm missing something something I don't understand. And it was a wonderful conversation. We talked about a lot of things. And then the first thing I did the next day at work was said, "Hello, ladies." And that's okay. That's where I'm at, right? But I stopped and I said, the social identity wheel. This is where you're learning. You don't need to say hello, ladies, when you're in a classroom. One of my typical statements is, ladies and gentlemen, open up your notebooks. Here's the do now, right? Just the fact that it's made me aware of where I am, how what society has placed upon me, what my societal norms are, and how I can change to better include. All week when I've been thinking about this panel, I've been thinking about the words accept and include, accept and include. And that, I think, is my core principle with this work. I need to accept and include everybody where they are, but I can't do that until I understand where I am. So it's a challenge and it's a reward. I'm excited because I recognize that I'm still doing it, ladies and gentlemen, but it's a reward because I recognized it, right?
And I think that's an important piece of the work that we talk about too, is we always lay that framework in our trainings and in the professional learning community. You're gonna make mistakes. We're all gonna make mistakes. Like, that's just like, it is. And so that worry, that you may have as you're learning things, to be like, oh my gosh, like 5 years ago when I said such and such to that student, like, did I totally ruin their lives? And it's like, you can't do that. You have to sort of take Kelly's lens and be like, okay, so I'm learning, and what can I do differently, and how, and catching yourself. So I just think that's important to acknowledge too, is that so much a part of this work is like, you just have to start like tabula rasa. Like, you have to give yourself a clean slate. You have to forgive yourself of all those things, because when you know better, you do better, and we didn't know. So I think that's an important component to acknowledge too. I'm mindful of time, so Olivia and Lara, if you don't mind, I'm going to move to another question and ask that you two, one of you two or both of you, respond to it. And I'd be really interested in sort of the advice that you might give to others who are about to embark on a journey like this towards more trauma-informed or healing-centered work. What would be kind of your words of wisdom or your thoughts that you would want to share with someone who's about to kind of start this journey for themselves?
Sure, I can jump in there. So coming to the work, I teach West African music and dance. I don't only teach this, but it's truly a passion of mine. I have loved it for over 30 years. I've been studying, I continue to study, I travel to Africa, blah, 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 blah. I am deeply passionate about the work. I say this because if you start from that, just always a reminder to start from the place that you're passionate about, that motivates you, that moves you, that's going to translate to your students. Whether or not my students become, professional West African drummers and dancers is not my objective at all. It's to use that, my passion, as a vehicle for them to connect to themselves. And then these art forms just lay the groundwork for all these other doorways and connections to curriculum, to social emotional learning, to diversity, cultural awareness, language. It's all right there. And so that's the other part of my advice, is to look at what you're already doing, right? Maybe with a little bit of a different perspective, or I know we do like an exercise with glasses a lot in our trauma training. Doesn't ever sound right, trauma training. So, don't feel the pressure to reinvent the wheel, and also take care of yourself. Build self-care into your work. For a long time, I have a yoga background, all kinds of stuff from 20, 30 years ago, and I purposefully built breath work into every single thing that I do. It was almost from a selfish perspective to remind me to breathe. But it just becomes something that works beautifully in terms of pacing any type of class that you're doing, just to stop and let's do it now. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Do it with me. Hold it for a moment and then exhale through your mouth. Just let it out. And I truly needed that moment. I'm going to mute myself once again.
The only other bit I would add is that as I am experiencing learning more about my white privilege every day, I find that it's all a journey. This whole process is a journey. So learning never stops, even for educators. I'm going to learn till I kick the bucket. So, I think it's okay to be wherever you're at in your journey. And know that they're going to be in a supportive community. This is an incredibly supportive community that will take you from where you're at and help you kind of learn along the way, meet you where you're at, and just be kind to yourself as you're adding to your toolbox and you're adding new techniques in there to translate that to your classroom and to yourself. So it's a journey.
Thank you all so much. This was like so good. I feel like we could keep going for like another hour, but I don't think they'll let us. I just want to say thank you to each of you for being so open and so willing to share your experiences in this work. I really appreciate it. And you're getting lots of hearts and claps from the folks on the session today. So I hope you feel the love because it's coming at you. And I would like to just take a moment and open up for some questions if folks don't mind. And I would ask that our educators as well as our facilitators be positioned to help answer questions because there may be things that you answer better than I do. So I'm going to just throw that out there before I bring up our little Q&A visual. So please feel free to raise your hand, turn the mic off, throw your question in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. And we're happy to take any questions that you might have for any of us and all of us and anything that you heard today. Don't be afraid to ask either. I would just say like, there's nothing that's off the table. We're a pretty open group. So is that your hand raised, Purple?
Yes, I'm curious since I'm with such a generous, brilliant group. Lara, your heart really inspired me and I got a vision. And I said, what does it look like in the fall for us to recreate some of what worked here? Recreating thumbs, hearts, and the reaction so that students can still kind of keep that going without the verbal, which is considered an interruption in class, but those type of symbols that really carried us in this last year on Zoom. What do you all think of that being like an activity to take what works?
Absolutely.
Oh, Purple, I love that.
100%. I think that's brilliant. And I think, reflecting on virtual learning was really, really hard for everybody, right? It was hard for students, for parents, for educators. But there were some brilliant things about virtual learning. And so I think that's just an inspiring question, sort of exploring and thinking about, well, what were some of the wins? What were some of the things we gained from that experience that we could now think about bringing back into the work that we're doing? I think that's a great question. And I know it's one that as an organization, we're reflecting on now too. There's a really good question in the chat too from Natasha. how do we use healing-centered practices to foster belonging in the virtual space? I think that's a really great question. And I don't know if any of our teachers or facilitators have an answer they'd like to share for that question.
I can jump in on that one. I'm going to go back to the breathing. I've transitioned and adapted some of the breathing techniques I've used in class for Zoom. And I start the class that way so that we are all on the same page. And we use a little vocal to do it, a little 1, 2, 3 chant. And students are invited to be either unmuted or muted, whichever they prefer, but encouraged to sing. And it doesn't matter how.
I love
that. Yeah, and it puts everybody on the same page and the page that they're comfortable with. So that works for me.
That's phenomenal.
I'll jump in too, just to answer that a little bit. One of the things we do in theater classes online is improvisation, just an opening improvisation that really connects everybody. So you start with a movement and everybody follows the movement. We could do it now if you want. Yeah, but then somebody changes the movements, and whose ever eye you're drawn to, you begin to follow that movement, right? So it's right, yeah. It's centering, yeah. It's centering, it's grounding, it's collaborative, it's community building. And then it sets you in that mode to learn. So, I guess what I'm learning from this, and again, I'm new to all of this as well, but what I'm learning is that it's not the obvious that you need to place in your classroom. It isn't, you think healing centered. So I have to heal. I must do something that is healing, in almost like in a verbal way, like it's what you say. It's not always what you say, it's just something simple that you do. Just collaboration in and of itself can have a healing effect by centering everybody. Right? I'm not sure if everyone else can relate to that. And I wanted to acknowledge Purple's question. I feel like maybe we didn't answer it. And I just wanted to say about the thumbs up and the hearts and the, emojis and the applauses, that, we might have the impetus as educators to say, forget about all of that virtual learning. It was awful, it was horrible. But always flipping the script is what I'm learning in Trauma Informed. And instead of flipping the script and getting rid of it, this was a part of our lives, a part of the children's lives for over a year. And to just get rid of it and say that it's gone from our memories, I don't necessarily think that that's a real healing approach. I think by integrating some of those things that we can connect to our life before us and make a better transition into the life that is ahead. We have to transition. We can't just do black and white, we're back to school, everything back to normal. There are a lot of things that have happened, and we need to make a smooth healing transition.
Yes, phenomenal. Thank you so much. I also just wanted to acknowledge that there is a link in the chat for a survey, and we hope that you will fill that out for the trust to give feedback on all of these sessions. And before we leave, I had one more slide, I'll just read it to you. It's nothing about us without us is for us, and I actually have it here at my desk that I look at every single day. And it's a South African disability rights and youth activist quote. And I just think that not only in our work as Arts Ed Newark and the importance of making sure that this is of Newark and with Newark, but also as you're thinking about trauma-informed care and healing-centered spaces, right? I think that's an adage to always remember. Nothing about us without us is for us, right? It's about community learning, community engagement and interaction. And so if there's nothing else you take with you today, I think that's just a good adage to kind of take with you on the journey. We hope to see you tomorrow. I will actually be at the opening keynote to introduce Dave Ellis from the Office of Resilience in the New Jersey Department of Children and Families, who's doing incredible work to help support schools all over the state in doing more trauma-informed and healing-centered work. And there's also going to be a great SEL Student Award presented by Superintendent Leon. So I'm excited to continue to be a part of the series, and I hope that you'll continue to join the Trust on this journey. Also, if you'd like to know more information about our work, you can find us at artsednewark.org. And we're also at Arts Newark on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So anything that happens in terms of trainings and additional opportunities to connect with this work, that's always a way to find out more. And again, that'll be available in the slide deck. So you'll have access to that as well. In addition to the recording, I encourage you, if there's someone you think you should share this with, you should absolutely do so. So thank you for going on this journey with us and creating this beautiful, brave space. And I hope that you are able to take this good energy with you throughout the rest of your week.